Okay, here we go. So I'm giving another speech in my public speaking class tomorrow, and so I'm going to practice my speech again in front of you guys. So here we go. Okay. All right, here we go. Okay. I've only practiced it once before, so bear with me again. I'll be reading off my note cards a little bit, probably. Okay, here we go. I remember the first time I visited the Middle East. I have to time myself. Hold on. Because if it needs to be between 7 and 9 minutes, I think. I hope. I'm not sure. Okay, we'll see. Okay. I remember the first time I visited the Middle East. I was with a whole bunch of coworkers who had been there before. We were in a crowded mall, and I recall seeing something that I liked across the hall. I pointed at it and said, "Hey guys, let's go look at that." One of my friends ran up to me, slapped my hand back down on my side, and proceeded to explain to me that in the Middle East it's very rude to point. I didn't know this, but he said instead of pointing, you should gesture with your whole hand instead. The rest of the day I went around going, "Please turn left, please turn right, let's go here, let's go there," in fear of being yelled at. And when we went to other countries, I would look up what was accepted and what wasn't accepted. I'm glad that my friend looked out for me, and now I want to look out for you and inform you about gestures and how they're used differently in our culturally diverse world. According to the Dictionary of Anthropology, written by Charles Winnick, gesture is described as a communication by moving parts of the body, especially the upper parts. It is often used by people of different language backgrounds and is a technique for the expression of emotions and artistic feelings and ideas. We need to be able to bridge the communicational gaps that exist in our world today. If we can get the basics of nonverbal communication down, we can accomplish this slowly. This requires that we address the importance of gestures, how gestures are used differently in some of the cultures, and gestures that we might share with other cultures but have different meanings. In an ever-changing world where cultures are colliding and always changing, it's not as necessary as it used to be to understand differences. Oops, my bad. But it's still good to know because there are people out there who are more traditional about communicating in public. In Hawaii, we have a huge advantage. We live in a melting pot of cultures. We have the locals, Hawaiian, Japanese, and other people that bring us their cultures. The hula dance tells us stories through movements. Vacationers come to partake in the spirit of aloha. If we spoke the same and if we moved the same as they did, they probably wouldn't come here. Well, they might for the sun and the ocean, but most people come here to experience the culture. Each PU is known for its culturally diverse population of students. We should take this opportunity to share with each other differences in gestures. Roger E. Axtell, author of The Do's and Taboos of Body Language Around the World, has been presenting seminars, speeches, and exploring the globe in search of cultural differences in gestures for over 10 years. He explains that without gestures, our world would be static and colorless. As cultures collide, we need to become on guard, which is a fencing term, about the way we communicate. Although gestures can be informative and entertaining, they can also be dangerous because they are used so differently depending on where you're from. So let's look at a few examples of how gestures are used differently around the world. In the book A Cultural History of Gesture, edited by Jan Bremer, anthropologist Marcel Mauss is quoted in his essay The Techniques of the Body. He says, most elementary dimensions of physical behavior, the way people stand, sit, walk, use their hands, eat or sleep, vary greatly from society to society. In the First World War, there were differences in the way that the English and the French marched, the French being more rigid. Cinema would impact the way that women stood or walked as they tried to appear more beautiful, graceful, or important. Jan states that gesture is no more of a universal language these days as it was back then because it is the product of social and cultural difference. Roger Axtell gives us a few examples of unique gesture differences in our world today. Japan uses body gestures to show respect and gratitude, the most common being the bow. The lower and the longer the bow is held, the more respect and gratitude you are trying to show. And despite popular belief, the bow is not as commonly used in places such as China, Hong Kong, Taiwan, Singapore, or even, I was supposed to put or even earlier. Handshakes are more common there. In the Middle East, you must be careful about how you use your limbs. Not only is pointing rude, but showing the soles of your feet is considered rude because it is considered the most unclean part of your body. And speaking of unclean, use your right hand to eat and shake hands and wave because the left hand is used for more hygienic purposes. I'm assuming like coughing or something. This is also acceptable for men to hold hands over there. If you think that's awkward, the Maori tribes people of New Zealand rub noses in greeting, but it's considered bad manners to use toothpicks and chew gum in public. So we can see that there are unique differences in the way gestures are used. However, what we really need to worry about are the gestures that we share with other cultures that could be interpreted by the receiver in an unintended way. One of the more extreme examples of how gestures can be misinterpreted is retold by Roger Axtell. In an example, when Vice President Richard Nixon made a goodwill tour of Latin America in the 1950s, he signaled the A-OK sign when he stepped off the plane to greet the people. The crowd booed him because in that area of the world it meant screw you. In the south of France, this same gesture means zero or worthless. If something similar happens to you anywhere in the world, try to be careful about smoothing things over with something like the peace sign. If you get it wrong and flip it backwards, you're saying up yours in England. If communication is going great, think twice about signaling to friends that it's all good with a thumbs up. Because according to Adam Kendon, author of Gesture, which was published in the Annual Review of Anthropology, Iran interprets the thumbs up as screw you, and Japan interprets this as boyfriend. This could probably cause some unwanted attention either way. It might be beneficial to excuse yourself from a bad situation by giving a polite farewell to the person you're communicating with. In fact, they might beat you to it, but beware, because some Italians and Greeks will often wave goodbye by extending their arm and palm up and curling their fingers in back and forth. We would interpret this as come here, and probably would. These are just a few of the many ways gestures are used in our diverse world, but there's simply not enough time to cover them all. But you can see how important it is to understand gestures because we live in such a melting pot. And because it's so diverse, we must understand how all these gestures are used and be ever mindful of the ones that are the same, that have different meanings. I encourage you all to observe cultural differences in the way we use body language. Pay attention to the way you do it in your everyday life. You may be the one saving a friend from an unwanted situation someday. Okay, yeah. Not bad, I guess, for second time practicing. But I know when I get up there tomorrow. Oh, wait, how long was it? It was 7 and 9 minutes, please. It was about 8 minutes. That's not bad. And I know I'm going to be speaking at the speed of light tomorrow, so I'll probably cut a couple minutes off of that. Okay, cool. Practice a couple more times. Thanks for listening. Have a good night.